Hi everyone. Welcome back to Reading with Raptors. We're a little discombobulated right now. I just gave our great horned owl guest a couple pieces of newspaper with some very small pieces of rat in them. Hopefully she'll figure that out here shortly. Get her wing tucked back in. She was pretty interested in the newspaper I had earlier. What I'm hoping will happen later on is that she'll be able to interact with the newspaper and do one of my personal favorite activities that I hardly ever get to show anyone, called caching. Spelled a little bit different than what you might be thinking. C-A-C-H-I-N-G, caching. So we'll hopefully be able to see her do that behavior, which is usually when she has some sort of enrichment object like this. She'll take it and she'll shove it inside of the mailbox. Kind of a typical behavior for a lot of raptors, especially a lot of owls and a lot of our smaller raptors who might find some food and not be able to eat all of it at once. So not something that you might see a lot of great horned owls doing outside of kind of a nesting situation, but certainly a behavior in her kind of repertoire, a behavior that she knows how to do. So right now she might just rip apart newspaper though. So we'll let her work on that while we read. A few things to start off with, just so I don't forget, and I'll repeat these again at the end. So if you've been following our Meet a Raptor series, our kind of 30-minute big Q&A sessions that we've been doing with a different raptor each week on Fridays and then Mondays. We are not having one this Friday, since that is the University of Minnesota holiday. So the Raptor Center has been closed. It will be even more closed than usual, so we will only have one staff person on here in the education department just to take care of birds. So we will not be having a Meet a Raptor on Friday, but make sure to join us again on next Monday when you will get a chance to meet our resident turkey vulture, really up close and personal, which is always great fun. So we hope to see you all then. As always, keep an eye on our main website and on our Facebook page for more information about our online programs. We have a couple of great options if you are looking for things to do at home. We have a couple of great things where you can invite the Raptor Center to a Zoom meeting or book an online program with us as well. So keep an eye on all of that. In the meantime, this is one of our great horned owls. We call her Lois. Like I said, hopefully she'll be doing some of that caching behavior because it is one of my favorite things to watch. So we'll keep an eye out for that. We are also going to be reading a book called Fly by Night. It is a book by June Crebbin, illustrated by Stephen Lambert. I've been very excited to read this one because I think the art style is precious, and I'm very excited to share it with you all. So this is, we will hopefully be able to hear everything over the sound of ripping newspaper. So it says Fly by Night. So here's just the opening page. It's this beautiful daytime sky with some birds flying around. Here's the title page. Fly by Night. Once, at the edge of the woods, lived two owls, a mother owl and her young one, Blink. Every day, all day long, they slept. Every night, all night long, the mother owl flew and Blink waited. Here they are during the day. You can see the bright sun in the background. And here's Blink waiting for his mom to come back during the night. One day, when the sun was still low in the sky, Blink opened one eye and said, "Now? Is it time?" "Soon," said his mother, "soon. Go back to sleep." Blink tried to sleep. When the sun rose and warmed the earth, he opened the other eye. "Now is it time?" "Not yet," said his mother, "soon. Go back to sleep." You can see this young owl pestering this older owl, wondering, when do I get up? Blink tried. Butterflies looped and drifted past him. Beetles scuttled in the undergrowth. Nearby, a woodpecker tapped on a tree trunk. Here we have some butterflies, some nice beetles fluttering around Blink's head. Still Still working on our newspaper here. Blink couldn't sit still. "Is it time yet?" he said. His mother opened her eyes. "You are old enough and strong enough." Blink dithered with excitement. "But you must wait." His mother closed her eyes. "Wait for what?" Blink wondered. We have some, looks like swallows flying above. We have the two owls talking in the tree. We have an owl talking in here. The sun was at its highest. A squirrel leapt from tree to tree quicker than a thought. Along Blink's branch it came, right past him, its tail streaming out behind. Blink wriggled and jiggled. He couldn't sit still. There's that squirrel running past, and there's a very impatient small owl. All that long afternoon, he watched and waited. He shuffled and fidgeted. Below, in the clearing, a deer and its fawn browsed on leaves and twigs. High above, a falcon hovered, dipped, and soared again into the sky. "When will it be my time?" said Blink to himself. Here's that beautiful afternoon scene. The deer here at the bottom, and it looks like the falcon up here. Toward dusk, a sudden gust of wind sweeping through the woods, lifting leaves on their branches, seemed to gather Blink from his branch as if it would lift him too. "Time to fly," it seemed to say. Blink fluffed out his feathers and shifted his wings. Very gusty wind on this little owl. You can see one of his little feathers flying away. But the wind swirled by. It was all puff and nonsense. Blink sighed. He closed his eyes. It's that wind finishing rushing away. Blink closing his eyes. The sun slipped behind the fields. The moon rose pale and clear. A night breeze stirred. "Time to fly." "Puff and nonsense," muttered Blink. "Time to fly," said his mother beside him. There's the sun setting. And here's our two owls in their tree as night falls. Blink sat up. "Is it?" he said. "Is it really?" The gray dusk had deepened. Blink heard soft whisperings. He saw the stars in the sky. He felt the dampness of the night air. He knew it was time to fly. He gathered his strength. He drew himself up. He stretched out his wings and... There are these two owls. There's Blink getting ready to fly. And he lifted into the air. Higher and higher he flew, farther and farther, over the woods, over the fields, over the road and the sleeping city. High in the sky, his wing beats strong, Blink flew on. So here he is flying through the sky, flying past a very tall building, flying over the rest of the town, city. Now he knew what he'd been waiting for. The sun had slipped behind the fields. The stars had appeared in the night sky. There he is flying with that big full moon. He had waited because he was meant to fly at night. Love this big rolling hills. I think these are sheep up here sitting out in their fields. And there's this tiny owl flying, swooping low over the nice dark hills and grasses. Here's the final page. Is this beautiful night sky and that little owl down in the corner down here. So that was Fly by Night, kind of a short one for this week, but I've been really looking forward to talking about this very small owl learning about the best time to fly, which of course for owls is usually at night, especially here for most of North America, and really most of the world, where we usually have a good kind of distribution between nighttime and daytime. Can be really interesting, especially for places that are very, very, very far north or very, very, very far south, near the poles, where they really might not have a full nighttime or a full daytime for parts of the year. So sometimes you do see owls living in those places who have a little bit different sleep schedule. But for most of us, you normally will only see owls really active kind of between sunrise or sunset and sunrise when it's a little bit darker out, where they're a lot better at hunting, looking for those small animals that they are so good at catching during the nighttime. Someone was commenting that Lois is certainly a personality. Definitely, so you've been hearing a lot of those noises. So this particular great horned owl is what we call a human imprint, and that is to show a difference between a kind of a bird who would have imprinted on their parents. So she should be imprinted on great horned owls, and instead was imprinting on people. Now, what does that mean? That means that when this bird was a very young bird, there's a little part of her brain that kind of turned on, that was supposed to really learn in a really short amount of time, what does it mean to be a great horned owl? And that little part of her brain, it's really important, it turned on, it was ready to learn, and instead of seeing great horned owls like she was supposed to, she had ended up outside of her nest, and someone had found her and was trying to help her out. Maybe didn't know the best way to help her. So instead of imprinting on a great horned owl, she imprinted on people. So that's what we mean when we say human imprint. Now, the problem is that little part of her brain that tells her how to be a great horned owl, it's turned back off now. She's already learned, or thinks that she's already learned. So she doesn't know that she doesn't quite understand how to be a great horned owl. Her brain went, okay, that was enough learning about that. We know how to be a great horned owl. So she's perfectly capable of learning a lot of things, but her kind of basic idea of how to be a great horned owl is a little bit different than what it should be. So that is why this owl is with us, and that is why you are hearing a lot of these extra noises that she's making in the background. Normally, like we saw with Blink in our book, normally owls are flying super sneaky and quiet at night. So they have their very soft, fluffy feathers to help them sneak through the air almost silently. Normally, these birds are all about being very stealthy, very sneaky. But as you can tell, this bird is not very quiet. It's because she's making noises that normally young owls learn to stop making because their parents teach them that. But since she was raised by people, she doesn't quite know that. So she's making quite a bit of noise for an owl who's supposed to be very sneaky. And making a lot of very young owl noises for a bird who I believe is 19 years old this year. So just to give you an idea of just a little bit confused about how to be a great horned owl. But still knows a lot of great behaviors, and finding food certainly is one of them. Finn wants to know how long the horns are. Oh, I wish I had pulled out some of the feathers. So right now, a lot of the birds are molting. This bird has a pretty easy molt. It takes a nice long time. You usually can't tell too much by looking at her. Some of the other birds right now are looking a little threadbare, a little scruffy. They really look like they're missing some chunks of feathers. So we actually have a nice little collection of some of their the tufts, those what we call the horns. So those feather tufts, a lot of our great horned owls are losing those tufts and growing in new feathers to replace the old ones. So, they're a couple inches long. I'd say probably about this long, kind of from end to end, so a couple of inches long. They kind of attach down kind of near the base, kind of on the skin near the top of her head. So she can put them all the way up, or she can tuck them all the way down. Usually she kind of keeps them kind of part way up. Usually if they're really, really up, it's because she really needs to pay attention to something. So she's really focusing on something. Or maybe something is a little bit maybe scary or potentially dangerous. So she really needs to be paying close attention and looking. Or I'll see that her or other great horned owls kind of tuck them down and flatten them if they are going to need to fly. So either if we're doing some sort of flight training, which we do with this bird a lot, or if she goes, hey, I want to move a little bit away from that thing, so I'm going to fly to a different perch, she'll tuck those in to be nice and aerodynamic, to really cut through the air. You don't want these big feathers flapping around in the wind when you're flying. You want to tuck them down. So you'll see them kind of move around for different reasons. Someone was asking, is that sound for telling her parents where she's at? A little bit, for the most part. So there are a couple of different noises that great horned owls, especially young great horned owls, make. There's that kind of, I would describe it as sounding a little bit like a honking kind of noise. And then there's another noise that she makes that's more kind of raspy, and I'll see if I can point out the different ones as she makes them. But the kind of main, there's this kind of main noise that she's been making, and then there's a little bit of like a chittering one. And so the chittering one is one that I normally hear most often. Right now she's been making more of the actual kind of what we call a food begging call, which usually is like, okay, there's food, I would like some food, where's the food, food is happening, those kinds of noises that you would normally hear a young great horned owl making towards its parents to say, hey, I'm hungry, please feed me. There are some other noises that's kind of like a chittering noise that we'll oftentimes hear this owl in particular make a lot of. That could be a little bit more multi-purpose. That's kind of a general noise that great horned owl youngsters can use for a lot of reasons. Thing with raptors is that they don't really have a big range of noises that they can make. So a lot of times the noises that they do make have to mean a couple different things. So the chittering noise is kind of the all-purpose one, and then that specific noise is a food begging noise, typically. It's actually a great way to find out if you're ever listening to a recording of a great horned owl's hooting noise, that big like hoot, hoot, hoot noise. If it ends with that kind of squawking, honking kind of noise, you can usually, it's a pretty good bet that it's either a pretty young owl kind of learning how to make that noise, or odds are very good that it was recorded from a captive owl who is a human imprint. So again, not normally a noise that you would hear an adult owl make. So someone was asking, how old is she? So to kind of give reference to all of the things that I'm saying about, these are all things that normally a young owl would do. This bird is 19 years old this year. So she is definitely an adult great horned owl. They reach full size after hatching after about 2 to 3 months. They're usually no longer living with their parents by the fall. So they'll hatch in the spring and then live with their parents kind of until that early fall, and then here, let me see if I can adjust so you can see her more. They'll live with their parents until kind of the fall, and then after that, they're kind of, after that first year, they are pretty much considered adults. So she has been an adult for quite a long time, but because of being raised with people, I was not quite sure how to do that. Okay, so someone is asking, isn't it morning? So maybe wondering, why do I have this great horned owl awake during the morning? What a great question, right? Because we just talked about these owls are normally awake during the nighttime. So a couple of things happening. One is that even though a lot of our owls are more what we call nocturnal or awake at night, or what we call crepuscular, which means active kind of around sunrise and sunset, crepuscular. Most of our owls are either nocturnal or crepuscular. But us humans, we are what we call diurnal. We're awake during the day. So a lot of times when we are first training a lot of these owls to be members of our education department, usually we know most of the time that we're going to need to see people is going to be during the day, because that's when people are awake. So we have to do a bit of training when we first get a lot of owls, and for a lot of them it's actually pretty easy to adapt to being awake during the day, since that's when all the activity is happening, that's when food is happening. The other thing is, humans have a really weird sleeping schedule. We are one of the very, very few creatures out there that gets to go and lay down and be asleep for a huge length of time without waking up. That is not normal for a lot of animals. So even though we think of owls as being only awake at night, they're really pretty much awake the whole day, doing a lot of napping, a lot of snoozing. there's been a lot of really interesting studies about how birds sleep. There are some birds that are able to kind of shut down half of their brain and kind of pay attention with one eye while the other half of their brain sleeps. There are some birds that we know take, one of my favorites, there are some seabirds where they'll fly up really high over the ocean and they'll take 7-second naps as they coast down, and then they'll wake back up, fly up high again, and then coast back down while napping. So they'll take a ton of really teeny short naps, so they never have to land. They can keep on flying and still nap. So all of that is to say that usually owls, even if it's during the daytime, they're not actually asleep. They're kind of maybe napping, maybe snoozing a little bit, usually keeping an eye out. You want to make sure that if there are any crows that come by to try to chase you away, or if you're a smaller owl, if there are any predators around, you really need to be able to keep an eye out for them. So yeah, a very long answer to that question, but a couple different reasons why she's awake right now. But for the most part, this is a bird who's very used to being awake during the day. What is the largest prey a great horned owl will go after? Great question. So I actually have, maybe here in a minute, I will give her, I have a whole dead mouse, which is a pretty typical size of food. That's something that most owls will go after. Great horned owls have this huge range of places that they live, which means that they have a huge range of things that they'll eat. There really are very few things that a great horned owl will not eat. So really the biggest limit is the size. So we do know that great horned owls have actually been seen hunting skunks. So a skunk being a couple of pounds, a decent sized ground mammal. So they're one of the few natural predators of things like skunks. Now, you might also be thinking with that, okay, but don't skunks smell really bad? How are they able to hunt skunks? And here's a very interesting thing. Some other studies have been done with birds, and for the most part, most birds don't really have a good sense of smell. They might be able to smell some things, but they don't really seem to have a really good sense of smell like a lot of mammals do. So there are a few exceptions. Of course, things like turkey vultures who hunt dead animals by kind of smelling for them. There are some seabirds that we found do have a good sense of smell for hunting things like fish, looking for large areas where there might be a lot of fish around. Might be kind of stinky, so it might be helpful to have a good sense of smell. But for a lot of our kind of normal land hunting birds, a lot of our raptors, don't really have much of a sense of smell. So if a great horned owl goes after a skunk and gets sprayed in the face, maybe not a big deal because they can't really smell it, so it doesn't really bother them. This is an excellent kind of back view of a great horned owl. You can see those fluffy feathers moving around as she is really using some very strong neck and back muscles to kind of pull that newspaper apart. So she's using her curved, sharp beak to do the actual ripping and tearing, but the strength from all of that kind of comes from these nice muscles kind of down the back. So hopefully you're able to see kind of a nice view. I'll see if I can kind of angle this down a little bit without making it too jerky. Sorry, I have a shaky camera here for a second. There, maybe you can get a little bit better view of her as she's ripping that apart. See if she wants to move around a little bit more. I might also hand her here, since we've got the camera kind of down on her, I'm gonna see if I can hand her, I have a whole dead mouse I'd love to give her, because she's doing a great job. Can you hear? If I just put this piece of food here, will you kind of come a little bit closer? So that was a little piece of food, but I'm gonna hand her this whole mouse. And she's gonna bring it all the way over there, so of course we can't see very well. Best laid plans and all that. We were very excited about that mouse, I think, though. So she took the whole mouse and she swallowed it whole. So she didn't even stop to really rip it apart. So she's working really hard on all these pieces of newspaper. As you can see, all these paper shreds behind me now. She was really working on ripping those apart. But for something small enough like a yummy little mouse, really easy to just rip those into pieces, or to just swallow that whole without having to rip it apart. So even though owls, especially great horned owls, have these really big, strong feet and talons and that nice curved, sharp beak, excellent for tearing food apart, especially those larger animals like skunks or things like that, they're able to swallow prey whole as well, especially if it's small enough. I'm gonna scroll through and just make sure I didn't miss any questions that we have. These have all been really good questions, everyone. A couple of other things I'll maybe point out about great horned owls before we wrap up here. So if you look at that round face, that's something that a lot of people think of. Here, I'll just put it on her. That's something that a lot of people think of when they are really imagining just an owl, they'll think of the really big eyes, and they'll think of the big round face, or what we call that facial disc, that big kind of round circular face. So the facial disc is actually serving a very important purpose, and that is to help funnel sound into her ears. So she has really big holes on the sides of her head, kind of where those black lines, you can kind of see like on the sides of her face, she's got those big black lines there. That is where her ears actually are. They're really big holes on the side of her head. And so she doesn't have big flappy ears like we do, or like a lot of mammals do. So the facial disc is actually funneling sound into her head. It's kind of like, I'll scooch over here for a second. It's kind of like if you can't hear something, if you kind of curve your hand and kind of put it behind your ear like this, it makes things sound louder. So we kind of just do that on our own. When we can't hear something, we'll kind of cup our hands behind our ears. She has that built in to help her really excellent sense of hearing, so that a great horned owl out in the wild hunting with sound, they're able to pinpoint exactly where their food is just by listening to it. Ooh, okay, really good question. How many raptors have come through this year for aid? Okay, I would actually have to look at the exact number. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how many. I know it is on our website. Every week it's being updated on exactly how many. I do know that this year has been a pretty typical year in terms of numbers. So even though people have been doing a lot of stuff outside, getting out and hiking and doing yard work, stuff like that. So even though the world outside is a little bit different, we are still seeing just as many young birds, especially, as we do on kind of a typical year. So the clinic has not slowed down any. This being kind of one of the busiest times, is kind of the late spring through the summer is one of the busiest times in the clinic. So I know they are pretty full right now, with a lot of both young birds who either were in nests or birds who are just learning how to fly. And then kind of throughout the summer, we typically see a lot of first-year birds. So birds who are kind of just starting to kind of get out on their own, fly around, try to hunt on their own, still learning the ropes. So some of those young birds getting into a little bit of trouble. So we'll see a couple more of those as the summer goes on, I'm sure. Like I said, I'd have to double check. I don't want to say any totally wrong number, but I'll make sure I'll comment on this post right after this. Otherwise, if you check out our website at theraptorcenter.org, I know we keep a running tally on there as well. So I'll make sure to comment on that. And then someone was asking, do they like eagles' nests, or where else do they nest? And you are spot on asking about if they like other raptors' nests, because they certainly do. So a great horned owl especially are usually very good at finding old hawk or crow nests. Owls in general don't build their own nests. So we know a lot of really famous raptors who build their own nests and come back to them year after year. Things like eagles and osprey who build these magnificent huge nests. Owls are not like that. A lot of smaller owls will nest inside of holes in dead trees, or they're kind of nice, safe, enclosed spaces. Otherwise, great horned owls, especially since they are fairly large, and they nest really early on in the year. Here in Minnesota, they might be laying eggs as early as January or February. So even though it's really cold out, no one else is laying eggs, so they can sneak into those old hawk or crow nests, are usually kind of their favorites. Possibly an eagle or an osprey nest, but usually those are either pretty exposed or just a little bit too large. Certainly not unheard of, though, for them to try to take over one of those. But typically a little bit smaller in size, usually a red-tailed hawk nest, or another nest used by a crow, ravens, things like that are usually just the right size. So that is typically the kind of nest that you'll see, is a big kind of open stick nest that they've taken over. I think there's like one or two more on here that I wanted to ask. So how can we encourage owls to nest in our wooded backyard? Yeah, so there are some really nice designs for some bigger nest boxes, especially if you have any water near you. I've seen those be very successful, especially for barred owls. We have a couple of designs also posted on the website. I will also say, because again, I say this in literally every week, but the Cornell Lab of Ornithology definitely has some really good plans if you want to build your own nest box. Usually most of them are just a pretty easy couple slabs of wood that you can kind of drill together. Pretty straightforward. So they have some really good plans for both smaller nest boxes that you can use for like an American kestrel or some small owls or wood ducks or things like that. And then also some larger plans for something like a barred owl or a great horned owl. So I'll see if I can drop a link into the comments as well. So I'll get back to that one too. But yeah, definitely like a larger kind of hutch shape. I've also seen people when we go to try to put a nest back up, if we're not able to kind of fix the nest, but maybe the nest got destroyed for great horned owls, we'll often make just kind of like a wicker basket or something similar to that out of some branches and just kind of bungee cord that up into the tree. So that certainly has been helpful as well. They're not super picky as far as what the nests look like, but definitely some really good plans for some really good all-purpose raptor, especially good all-purpose owl nests out there. So I'll see if I can drop a link in there as well. Because there's some really cool options that you can put up for those nest boxes for them to find. Maybe one or two more. Okay, so how far can she turn her head around? Because you've probably been noticing her moving her head. So owls can turn their heads about 270 degrees around. So that's like if this is kind of like this is a circle. So if I can look like this way, oh, this is gonna be difficult. I'm just gonna put my head in here. Okay, so if I'm facing forward, and I can turn my head about 90 degrees, so 1/4 of the way around. If I was most other birds, I could turn my head and look straight behind me. I could turn my head 180 degrees, or halfway around. Great horned owls and other owls can turn their heads about 3/4 of the way around. So that would be like if I wanted to look over this shoulder, I could turn my head this way, look straight behind me, and then keep turning until I was looking in this direction. So owls have super flexible necks. Most birds, actually all birds, they have about twice as many neck bones as us mammals do. We all have 7 bones in our necks. Most birds have between 12 and 14, depending on kind of the species group. And they also are very flexible joints between those bones. So our necks are a lot more sturdy and stable, but they're not very flexible. Whereas bird necks are very flexible, but a little bit less sturdy. So it's kind of a trade-off there. So she's able to turn her head pretty far around. Not all the way around. A lot of people think that they can turn their heads all the way around, but that would be pretty painful, right? They still have neck bones in there that need to stay all attached. So about 3/4 of the way around. Owls need to be able to do that because their eyes are just so big. If you were, sorry, I keep poking my head in. If you were an owl, if you were kind of as big as you are, but you were an owl, your eyes would be the same size as your fist. So this is how big your eyes would be. Pretty big compared to our really teeny tiny human eyes that we use for seeing during the day. Owl eyes are huge. And so they need to be able, since they can't actually move their eyes, they're too big, they're stuck in place. So because they can't move their eyeballs, they have to be able to turn their whole heads to look around. It's kind of like having a pair of binoculars just kind of duct taped to your face forever. You wouldn't be able to move the binoculars, you'd have to move your whole head. So I think we'll wrap up there. I saw one more question that is reminding me. I have a couple quick announcements as we wrap up. So this has been a Great Horned Owl, so thank you so much for joining us for Reading with Raptors this week. A couple of kind of extra housekeeping announcements again. So for those of you who've been joining us for the Meet a Raptor programs, you might have noticed on our Facebook page as well, we do not have one this Friday because it is the university holiday, so we will be even more closed than usual, or than we have been for the holiday. So we will not be having a Meet a Raptor this Friday. But if you join us on Monday, we will be meeting a turkey vulture, our resident turkey vulture, Nero. And then we'll announce what we are going to be doing after that for the next week. So you can definitely join us next Monday, and then hopefully you all can have a great, relaxing, safe, and healthy holiday weekend if you are doing anything to celebrate. Other than that, again, continue to check out our website for more of our kind of program information as we kind of continue developing some of our online programs. There are lots of great options on there for you for things that you can do at home. So again, we hope you all have a great, like I said, healthy and safe holiday weekend. We will be back here again on Tuesday as well for more Reading with Raptors. And we'll hopefully see you all on Monday for Meet a Raptor as well. So until then, take care, and we will see you all hopefully next week. Have a good one.